If you're handing your rough early drafts to your spouse, your friends, or your critique group partners to find out what they think, you aren't helping your manuscript. You're forcing it to play tackle football without pads. Welcome to Talk Beta to Me, the audio companion to the blog. I'm your host, Chris Chinchilla. Every week, we take the lessons learned from the editorial desk and break down the narrative speed bumps holding your fiction back. Today on the show, No Friends Allowed, Why Casual Readers Are Killing Your Early Drafts. We are dismantling the feedback spectrum and mapping out the exact timeline for deploying beta readers, developmental editors, and casual readers so you can save your budget and your sanity. This episode was recorded live alongside a real-time audience on X. Stick around after the core craft reading for our live community Q&A, followed by our signature Something Weird trivia segment, where today we're looking at the only part of the human body that is completely incapable of healing itself. Let's head down to the live room and talk beta. No Friends Allowed, Why Casual Readers Are Killing Your Early Drafts. You wrote your first draft, revised it, and now you're wondering what people think. If you hand it to just anyone to read, though, you might run into heartache or wasted money. Different stages of a manuscript require varying levels of feedback. Handing the manuscript to the right person at the right stage of development ensures a more cost-effective, uplifting process. Think of getting feedback like inviting someone to row out onto a lake in your rowboat and asking them to describe the experience afterward. Part 1. The 3 tiers of the feedback spectrum. Tier 1. The casual reader, the surface paddler. Casual readers are typically friends and family. They purchase the latest beach read and chat about it with co-workers or book groups. They're intelligent, opinionated, and short on time, squeezing chapters into a few minutes with morning coffee, at work on their lunch break, or in bed after the kids are tucked in and their partner's snoring on the next pillow. They want the finished product. They want to have an adventure. They want to hop in the rowboat, admire the water's stillness and the grandeur of the mountain peaks, row back to the dock, smile and tell you, "That was very refreshing. Thank you." When you ask them to elaborate, they shrug and reply, "I liked it." They'll have more to say to their coworkers and book club members, but to you, the writer, you're unlikely to get much else from them. But that's okay, because "I liked it" or "I didn't" is a much more valuable barometer than you might realize if you ask for it at the right time. At the wrong time, though, the same feedback is almost worthless. We'll talk more about that soon. The danger of early casual feedback. Feedback from casual readers can be wonky too. Because their time is limited and they're not professional editors, they see everything that works or doesn't, but they're unlikely to lock onto it. They're not thinking about syntax, POV, or character arcs. They're thinking about the story and the hero. Because of that, 2 things happen. First, they overlook the line-by-line feedback you need right now by saying, "The middle was a little slow," but not being able to articulate something like, "The prose shifts into heavy stylization in chapters 5 and 6, and the protagonist becomes unexpectedly passive in a way that doesn't match her established psychology from previous chapters." Second, they pull a 180 and reveal themselves to be literary professors extraordinaire, reciting every technical term they recall from their Creative Writing 101 elective while earning their MS in Business Administration. They begin to share insights in a way that feels unintelligible, something like, "It was good, but the integral plot in Act 1 doesn't have a solid perspective shift. The thematic nuance of the protagonist's character arc is a deus ex machina that struggles to match their falling action catharsis." It honestly makes sense to them, and if we were to parse out their meaning, they're probably even correct. But they're struggling with precision, so the feedback becomes muddled and overly critical. In your heartbreak, you decide you'll never share your writing with your sister again, unless it's won the Pulitzer, which you can hide behind if she says she still doesn't like it. Relying on casual readers too early puts your manuscript in a position it might not be ready for, playing American football without any pads. Tier 2, the true beta reader, the landscape observer. True beta readers approach manuscripts with a more nuanced perspective. They're often fellow writers volunteering their time, paid hobbyists, or professionals. They expect to dive deeper. When you send them out in the rowboat, they're considering the comfort of the boat, checking for essentials like paddles and life vests, and noticing the ripples on the water. When they look up, they're asking whether the mountain peaks are welcoming or imposing, and whether they match the mood of the lake. They're casual readers in their spare time, but with your manuscript, they clock in. They're ready to work. Beta reader feedback often focuses on the macro level. It's sparse but valuable. They might offer a few comments in each chapter, and they'll conclude with 2 or 3 pages or 30 minutes of conversation, sharing their observations about what works and what to work on. They'll use phrases like character arc, plot convenience, and catharsis with greater precision. They can explain why middle chapters felt slower and offer a suggestion for handling the protagonist's apparent passivity during the narrative's climactic struggle so she's an active participant in the fallout. They're not alpha readers, though. Alpha readers are you and the readers of your first draft. There are no hard rules for getting feedback, but a good practice is to let that first draft's audience be you and you alone. It's vulnerable enough as it is. No need to subject it to glaring sunlight just yet. Beta readers are fantastic for second drafts and later drafts, and we'll talk about where to fit them in soon. Tier 3, the Developmental Editor, the Marine Surveyor. Developmental editors are your marine surveyors. When they step into the boat, they check hull integrity. When they row out onto the lake, they're measuring water depth. When they look up at the sun, they're noting the angle of its position in the sky, and they're asking whether all of these ought to be otherwise. They offer line edits to sharpen prose and inline comments on most pages. Their diagnostic report might be 5 to 10 pages long, not to mention the thousands of words of feedback they leave in the manuscript itself. They use terms with absolute precision. They know about contrast dye, cohesive plotting, the pacing valve, off-screen progression, narrative displacement, and other esoteric phrases, and they express those insights straightforwardly. Often, they'll use them in their own heads. Likely, they won't use them in their feedback to you. They're not there to lecture. Editors sometimes offer a single pass or multiple passes of your manuscript. The single pass is non-collaborative, provides cohesive commentary, and lets you use the feedback to create an entirely new draft. Multiple passes help you develop the new draft page by page and take longer, requiring much more collaboration. Editors often have degrees, although not exclusively, and have been beta reading and editing professionally for years. They're more down to earth than the average literary professor because they often, though not necessarily, are writers themselves, are editing manuscripts rather than grading them, and have a vested interest in your success. You're paying them for feedback, and they truly want to be helpful. They want your manuscript to shine. Sending them an early draft, though, limits what they can do for you. So, how do you actually structure your revision timeline to get the most out of your budget and protect your book's development? That's next. Want some live one-on-one feedback on a tricky scene or a messy plot point? Book a story strategy session for a collaborative 30 to 60-minute video chat. Head over to talkbeta2me.com/services and mention the code BETA10 in your initial message to get 10% off and break through your creative block. Part 2, the step-by-step manuscript timeline. You've got your casual reader, beta reader, and developmental editor. Intuition says to get their feedback in that order. Here's what I recommend. No casual readers for early drafts. Save them for the very end of your revision process. We'll talk about why in a moment, but if we're not starting with casual readers, where are we starting? Step 1, the first beta pass, draft 3 or 4. Begin with your beta reader. Send them your third or fourth draft. By then, you've had time to sit with the story, rework its mechanics, and gain some clarity. But as happens whenever we focus on anything for too long, that clarity eventually grows fuzzy. This is when you hand it to your first beta reader. The second one comes later. Why you should avoid critique groups for long projects. When seeking a beta reader, I recommend avoiding your critique group partners. They're great for one-off scenes and chapters, but for longer projects, we run into issues. You call them 2 weeks in and find they haven't started reading. You call them 2 months in and find they lost your manuscript file but didn't tell you. They want to help, they have good intentions, but let's be honest. They're busy, they have their own fiction to worry about, and they weren't enjoying your manuscript anyway and don't want to have to tell you. Go for a paid beta reader on platforms like Fiverr. Remember, Fiverr pricing can sometimes be a race to the bottom. Keep your budget in mind, but expect to pay around $100 on the low end for a decent beta reader. Ignore arbitrary seller levels and look directly at the actual substance of their written reviews. Look for specific deliverables, some inline comments throughout the manuscript, and a 2 to 4 page reader report in a reasonable timeline, say a week. They might have a queue. It might take them a week to read your manuscript, but they might not be able to start reading for a month. That's okay. Don't spend the month revising. Let go of that book for now and start working on the next one. Once you've received your beta reader's feedback, build goodwill by tipping them and rating them well if they did well, and then incorporate the suggestions you find valuable. It's okay if you disagreed with some of their suggestions. Take your manuscript through another 2 drafts, then hire your developmental editor. Step 2, the one-pass developmental edit, draft 5 or 6. At this point, your book should be as good as it's going to get under your command. You're at the point where you think, I'm ready to query or self-publish. That's exactly when you need to hire your developmental editor so that they can tell you, not yet, here's why, and here's how to fix it. If you've hired a good editor, you're going to be blown away by their insights in the best possible way. What you thought was gold, you'll find was only gilded, but they'll show you the secrets of alchemy. That character choice that's heroic but makes no sense with the protagonist's established psychology, they'll recommend how to adjust chapter 3 so the choice makes sense in chapter 25. That beautiful climactic chapter that goes on for 27 pages when the other chapters average about 10 pages, they'll show you where it could be split and why moving chapter 2 to the middle of what used to be the too long chapter 3, now split into chapters 22 and 24, will help keep the reader immersed in the chapter structure and heighten the tension by switching back to that other story thread. These would refer to editorial phrases such as cross-cutting or parallel narrative pacing. Now, with the editor's feedback in hand, it's time for the mostest realist rewrite you've ever rewrote it. All that feedback will likely result in a lengthy revision and a far superior draft. Step 3, the second beta reader, draft 7 or 8. You've got the best draft yet. So what now? Query or self-publish, right? Now you get that second beta reader, remember? This should be a brand new beta reader who is well-versed in your genre. Don't tell them where the novel is in its development. Don't say, it's gone through 5 drafts with a beta reader and a developmental editor, and I think it's just about perfect now. That way, you avoid priming them toward thinking they have to complement all that past work, or worry that they're dashing your dreams if it still doesn't hit the mark. Just ask them to read it. Chances are you'll notice remarkably different feedback from the first beta reader. Changes will still likely be necessary, but that's okay. That's why you hired the second beta reader, to return to that more laid-back feedback and see how the story shakes out. Step 4, the casual reader, draft 9 or 10. After another draft or 2, it's time to bring in the final audience, the casual reader. That's right, this is when you want to hand your book over to your friends and family, and that critical sister who was right all along. Remember, these readers have limited time and view books exactly the way you want your audience to, for adventure and escape. You hand them the absolute best product you've been able to put together, the one you hope finds its way to bookstores near you and into the hands of readers like them. And you don't tell them, this has gone through 10 drafts, 2 beta readers, and an editor. Instead, you say, this has been a labor of love. I think it's ready for some fresh eyes. Let me know what you think. Now, when they say, I loved it, or, and it's still possible, it didn't quite grab me, you and your book are completely different from where you were in that first draft. You know how to ask questions now, along the lines of something like, did you like that Anne jumped in at the end and wrestled the pirate to the ground? And you know how to take their feedback when they offer a response like, oh yeah, that was cool. It was a little out of nowhere though. You nod and rely on that editorial work you've learned how to do and think, mental note, slight adjustments to chapter 28 to make Anne's intervention feel more inevitable while maintaining the surprise. 2 beta readers, an editor, and 10 drafts later, you don't have to pull teeth from your casual readers. You already know how to diagnose the feedback. Once you've made those final tweaks, it's time to query or self-publish. You'll still get rejections or less than stellar reviews, but those are par for the course. They won't be as bad as they would have been otherwise, and you'll know it wasn't for a lack of trying. But more importantly, you'll have put your manuscript in the position it needs to be, padded up, ready to tackle head-on the team of agents, publishers, and readers eager to see what you've got. Or, to shift to that calming lake metaphor, to put your readers in that rowboat so they can lounge, look up at the sky, and think, this is a great rowboat, and this lake is a special place. I want to return here again and again, chapter by chapter, in my spare, precious time. And that wraps up the reading for No Friends Allowed. Let's open up the floor for some live Q&A. Hey, Matthew, let's talk beta.
Oh, yeah, I might have missed it, but I didn't hear you talk at all about alpha readers. It sounds like that's probably not something you would necessarily suggest.
Yeah, I did briefly mention it, I think, toward the beginning. Alpha readers of those, well, essentially it's us reading our own first drafts, probably as we're writing them, and then basically anybody who puts eyes on the first draft before anything happens to it. And I would generally recommend staying away from alpha readers because that first draft is when we are most vulnerable. Unless we're really comfortable with this person and we know that they're, and I'm not saying they can't be, straight talking or whatever, but as long as we know that they're going to be properly critical and we've had that experience with them, I would generally recommend hold on to that first draft. Let it be the initial version that's you and you alone. so that it doesn't get tackled and then gets, the idea gets crushed. On the other hand, sometimes small parts are great. If you're like, I like this dialogue exchange and I kind of want to share it with someone who I think might give me some good feedback on the tension of it, and you hand them a couple of pages of the first draft, that could be a great way to bring in really early or even casual readers for very small parts, because there isn't enough to tear apart and there's not enough to stomp on your heart.
It's interesting to me because I feel like this advice might be more towards new authors.
When we have authors who've been writing for years and maybe have self-published or been published traditionally, they're in a place where they've built that circle and they kind of know who to go to and who not. On the other hand, I think even as an experienced writer, building out that circle, if we think of ourselves, as the center of the circle and we've got different layers of where to go, sometimes thinking about how do we restructure that circle and where do we, maybe we take somebody that's in the inner circle and start putting them on the outer circle where they're our third or fourth person that we go to instead of our first. It might be worth experimenting to just play with it, because as creatives, we don't want to get stuck in one place of feedback. But I'm definitely addressing new readers. A lot of people stumble when they get to the beta reading or the developmental editing place. That's actually more the level of what I'm hoping to address is this is when to bring them in and where to go find them.
On this topic specifically, I do teach a class every now and then on fear, because fear is a very big part of any artistic venture. You're putting something you created out there and you're just terrified people won't like it.
Yeah.
And the thing that I say is that the antidote to fear is experience. And one of the I encourage new authors to do is to put their fresh, just written work out online, maybe not their big book idea, but just to get used to overcoming that fear of sharing, to go on a website like Royal Road or whatever and just start posting chapters of something you're writing and getting feedback, because it will help build confidence as you see that people do enjoy what you're writing. And if they're not enjoying what you're writing, you'll get the feedback and know why and see what you can improve upon if you approach it with the right mindset.
J.L. Wallace made a great point about how showing a draft too early sent their muse on a vacation for months. And I think we've all been there, where one misaligned comment on an early and fragile idea just completely kills the spark and freezes the project. It's not about avoiding feedback, not at all. It's more about where do we place the feedback. And sometimes we give our casual readers the most power when they are getting the final polished version. But our beta readers, either the trusted critique partners or maybe someone we go and hire, helps us to get the same kind of feedback that might even be a little bit more tougher and a little bit more critical, but is also a little bit more precise, that takes that tough skin and forges it in, it's steel forging steel at that point. Switching topics, there's a resource desert dilemma. What if I say, hey, avoid casual readers, try your beta readers, try your editors, go hire them. It's kind of one of those things where it's like decent editing can cost $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, depending on the length of the manuscript and the busyness of the editor. Beta reading can be upwards of $500 for the experienced beta readers out there who have been doing this a while. And the question becomes, okay, look, all I've got is casual readers. All I've got is my friends and family, and maybe some partners in my writing group where we get together for coffee at Starbucks every now and then, or we jump on Zoom. That's all I have. And I don't have time and I don't have the money right now. My answer to that is to consider an alternative. That's where it's not about hiring necessarily for the entire book sometimes. Sometimes it's, can I get a beta read of the first 5,000 words? Can I get an edit of the first 10,000 words? I usually spend the bulk of my time on the manuscript in the first 50 pages. If it's 300 pages, most of my time, my editing, my inline comments are going to be in those first 50 pages, because that's where I'm identifying all the habits that are, of course, going to feature in the rest of the book. So that price drops. There's also other ways to look for those. Like I said, some of those lower priced ones to get those initial feedback. You'd be surprised what you might get for 10 or 15 bucks, especially for a new seller on Fiverr who's trying to make a name for themselves. So shifting Miss April, she pointed out that getting glowing feedback too early can actually lock in opinions about your own draft. She was saying if your early casual readers tell you, this is perfect, don't change a thing, you build up a false shield, she said. You can When you finally get to a professional edit or a deeper beta pass and you get more critique, your immediate reaction might be to think, well, the other readers loved it, so this editor must just be a hater. Too early glowing praise could actually damage how we receive later more critical and more precise feedback from someone who's more attuned to this particular part of the process. Kevin, Eric, Paul, welcome to Talk Beta to me. Let's talk beta.
I was just going to ask if you ever use writing find critique partners and swap pages with beta readers, that kind of thing. I found it's pretty useful. Like you can lurk for a bit, and it might take some time reading some things that they've posted, deciding if someone's, skilled enough to maybe take a look at your own work. Like I said, it does take time, but I found that to be a very valuable resource for beta reading, and finding people who aren't at like the very beginning kind of level with writing and editing.
And that is where our live recording with Kevin cut off, but it was far too good to leave on the cutting room floor. My answer to Kevin was absolutely take advantage of that. I know some writing groups have a new member actually just hang out and listen for the first session that they attended. The idea was that they were there to listen, also to really give the writer and the group a chance to vibe with each other. You also have an opportunity sometimes to be able to do that on places like Fiverr if you're going to hire a beta reader, where they might have samples right there on the screen that you can kind of check out and see how they're editing. Kevin was also saying that this is helpful to ensure that you're not dealing with or hiring a beta reader or an editor who's maybe at the very beginning kind of level with their work. Taking a chance on some of those new sellers can be helpful. I just highly suggest looking at how detailed or how well put together their gig is on Fiverr or any platform that you're looking for. If it's really well put together, if you can see that they put time into their description and into their images, then you're working with someone who cares about details. Because without ratings and without clients, the first thing that's going to speak to anybody is whether or not they've got that professionalism in how they present themselves to the world. It's that old adage, dress for the job you want. A man without a smile must never open a shop. If you're seeing good details and a professional public appearance, then give them a shot, especially if you're on a budget or if you're still kind of getting used to this process of finding your beta readers and your editors. Don't avoid someone like a beta reader or an editor because they're at the beginning level. Everybody starts somewhere, but don't let budget constraints jump you into hiring someone with a very low dollar amount that does not have that great public-facing page, that does not speak to you with professionalism and attention to detail. Whether they are a new seller with 0 reviews or they're an editor who's been around for 5 years with hundreds of reviews, we want to know that they're going to treat our manuscript with the utmost respect, no matter where they're at in that journey, and no matter where you're at in your journey. And that wraps up our live community session for the week. If you want to grab the mic yourself, ask a question about your current draft, or just hang out in the room with us, we broadcast live on X every single Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Our next live session is Wednesday, July 22nd, and I'd love to see you in the room. If you want to stop guessing if your pages are working and get an objective, disciplined eye on your manuscript, head over to talkbetatome.com to check out my one-pass developmental editing or book a one-on-one story strategy session. While you're there, be sure to check out our weekly blog posts and past episodes just like this one for more deep dives into narrative craft. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. Every month, you'll get a roundup of my latest editorial insights, plus an exclusive, subscriber-only look at part of a real manuscript showing my actual notes and the exact polishing edits we used to make it shine. Before we go, it's time for something weird. Did you know that human teeth are the only part of the body that can't heal themselves? They're coated in enamel, which isn't a living tissue, meaning once it's damaged, the decay or crack is permanent. If you break a bone, your body's internal systems naturally knit it back together over time. But if you crack a tooth, you need an external mechanic with specialized tools to drill and fill the gap. So, take care of your enamel. Because while fixing your manuscript's plot holes can sometimes feel like pulling teeth, I highly recommend leaving the literal drills to the dentists. I'm Chris Chinchilla. Thanks for listening. See you next week.